San Diego is the first of a series of 4 of these presentations brought to you by Californians for the Arts, which I'm past president of, but today I'm wearing the hat as president of California Arts Advocates. Just wanted to give a shout out to a couple of people that are here. We have Vicky Estrada. Stand up, Vicky. Vicky is doing a fantastic job representing, well, the whole field, but of course San Diego at the California Arts Council. And Leah Goodwin, I think, who will be joining us, is also a San Diego member on the California Arts Council. Tony Duran is here. She's always at arts events. I'm so appreciative. Tony is Senate Pro Tem Tony Atkins, main woman, man, person here in San Diego. Tony, give us a shout out. She helps carry the water for us, in Sacramento. I thank her for that. Jonathan Glass, Executive Director of the city's Commission for Arts and Culture. Yay, Jonathan. So busy. The Arts Commission is doing fantastic, and we have a commissioner, Tyler Hughes, is with us as well. Thank you for being here, Tyler. So I get to run through really quickly what's happening today. It's a full agenda. Again, we're the first of a series of 4, and Julie Baker, who's the CEO and president of California for the Arts and California Arts Advocates, is like thrilled to start this off in San Diego because we're so nice, right? So after my review of the agenda real quick, I'm going to introduce a very important person from the Old Globe to just say hello. And I would like to thank the Old Globe for this magnificent facility. Really appreciate. Thank you so much. Also, thanks to the San Diego Regional Arts and Culture Coalition, who you will hear from Felicia, following Timothy Shields. And just also acknowledge that one staffer at the Globe, Bridget Cantu-Ware, is a member of the board of Californians for the Arts. This is Felicia, myself, and Jonathan Glass and Duluth Smith. So, full agenda. Julie Baker, following Felicia, she'll frame up the state of and national impact of COVID and everything that's related to the crisis. AB 5, a lot of us are still really reeling from that legislation. So she'll give us a rundown on that. Then we're really happy to have Adam Fowler here. Adam is a founding partner of CVI Economics, and he's going to share findings, what they found through an extensive research project. So we'll get some statistics and data behind all of it. Then, of course, I know this is why you're all here too, besides to hear from Julie and folks, is a panel of San Diegans. Well, you're all the best and the brightest, but we had to choose a few people. And Felicia will introduce the panels that come up, and Katie McDonald with the San Diego Symphony will introduce the panel, and there'll be opportunities for you to pose questions to the panel. And they're going to tell us, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we're really looking forward to hearing from them. And then finally, Julie will jump back up again, and after what she's heard from the panel with the questions, she's going to guide us through what's next, where do we go from here, what opportunities there might be at the state. And so then we have more coffee and pastries, like a lot of pastries. So help yourself. So I'd like to introduce to you Timothy J. Shields, the Audrey S. Geisel, Managing Director, the Old Globe.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thanks for coming to the Globe. This is Haddix Hall. We love having people up here. In normal circumstances, we love particularly here in the middle of a summer, which at the Globe is our very busiest time of the year. Most of you are aware that we have 3 theater spaces here within throwing distance of where we are today. Right underneath us is our Cheryl and Harvey White Theater, where we're concluding a really terrific run of madcap adventure. Wait a minute. Potential spam. I hate that when your phone goes off in the middle of a speech. Should remember to leave that behind. But down in our Cheryl and Harvey White Theater, we're concluding a run that we extended by a week. And I wish everyone could come see it, but I think we're getting close to being sold out. Alex, pretty close? Pretty close to being sold out. So one more week left in that run. Over in the Globe Theater, we're just about to do a production of Cabaret and think that that will go very, very well. We're a week away from the stage for that and hope that everyone will come see that. Then outdoors, we're doing The Merry Wives of Windsor, the second of our 2 Shakespeare plays in the summer. And this is set in the world of the sitcoms of the 1950s. So think of I Love Lucy, think of the Dick Van Dyke Show, think of all of that madcap merriment, married to Shakespeare. All outdoors there. So that's got another couple of weeks to run. If you have the time, please come see us and you'll have a great time at the Globe. So with that, I don't want to take any more time up right now. Welcome here. Hope you have a great rest of your day here at the Globe.
Thank you, Tim. You're the Old Globe has always been such a leader in our region and putting us out there at the national and international levels. And so we can't appreciate you guys more. Thanks everybody for being here for this really important conversation. I mean, we know what's happening in the performing arts all over. There's strikes going on, there's protests. We're in a different place than we were pre-COVID. And so this is the kind of thing that SD-RAC likes to do. We like to get everybody together, not just to gripe about it, but to really talk about solutions. And that's why I think today is an important gathering. Before we get started, I do want to take a moment and thank SD-RAC's board that works so hard to ensure that these kind of gatherings can happen in partnership with others. Would our board members who are here today, please raise your hand so we can thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So I get the pleasure of introducing Julie Baker, who I think is just a phenomenal leader, and I think you should move the headquarters to San Diego. That's what I'm thinking. But anyway, Julie became CEO of our statewide arts advocacy organization in 2018. It seems like yesterday. And since then has worked to increase the legislative clout and visibility of the arts and culture sector by building a coalition across California's creative industry. She is credited with producing a month-long arts awareness and advocacy campaign in April, Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month, which we're going to do again next year, and fighting for resources and legislation to serve and protect artists and cultural workers. That means money. She has brought us a ton of money. I want her to keep doing that. She serves as the California State Captain to the Americans for the Arts National Arts Action Summit. So we have connections in higher places. The State Arts Action Network Council, and is co-chair of the Western Arts Advocacy Network for WestAF. Her work has been recognized with many awards, most notably the 2021 Aileen Valkanis State Arts Advocacy Award from Americans for the Arts, which honors an individual at the state level whose arts advocacy efforts have dramatically affected the political landscape. That's a lot. But you'll see when she comes on, you'll understand why she's so recognized. So Julie, come on up and get this party started.
Well, I always say, this is definitely not I. There is no I in any of this because advocacy is never one person. It is all of us doing the work together. So although I get to be the face, there is never just Julie alone in any of this. So I wanted to just go into it immediately and start talking about why we're here today. Just briefly on my own personal background too. I have a little bit of experience in this. I did run a performing arts center for 8 years in a rural community in Northern California. So I am familiar with what that feels like, what it's like to have to make that financially work, how to build audiences, particularly in a rural community, in my case, and how to work with your city, your county, your state, and your federal to really be recognized as solution partners and economic development partners in your own community. So I'm certain that is certainly what everyone here is doing. And we are so grateful to be here in San Diego. It is wonderful. And again, thank you to all of the folks who helped put this on, in particular partners at the Old Globe, and to SDRAC and the leadership under Felicia and my good friend Matt Carney. So thanks to everyone here and our team as well. So we're really, we are your statewide advocacy organization. We have both a nonprofit, Californians for the Arts, which is part of our work is to put these types of convenings together, talk about what's happening in the sector. And then our C4, which is a lobbying organization where we have a lobbyist based in Sacramento, is where we really try to influence public policy to support the arts and culture and creative industries and the workforce specifically. So obviously, we've been tracking what's been going on for several years in terms of the live and performing arts. Pre-COVID, there were obviously, this wasn't a perfect scenario for our sector pre-COVID. And then we also had in 2020, AB5 became the law, which how many of you are familiar with AB5? Yes, okay. Maybe you came to some of those sessions that I did. I think we did about 18 of those across the state in 2020 and late 2019. So what we're seeing, and again, this is what we're seeing, part of why we're doing these, we do have 4 of these, Sacramento, San Diego, Los Angeles, and San Francisco, thank you. They all start with S, where we're going to be doing all of these types of convenings. We really want to hear from you, but this is what we're seeing. We're calling it a crisis, but we're saying that we are incredibly resilient, which we know we are. So what we're seeing, of course, is COVID-19's impact and audience behavior change. Obviously, we're seeing that in some cases, I've been talking to a few of you, not always the case, but in some cases we are seeing a reduction in audiences. We're seeing a reduction in subscriptions. And folks are just at a certain age not going out as much. We've also become more accustomed to getting our entertainment at home. I know for myself, I've seen that even in myself. I'm just not going out as much. So, that is something we need to adapt to. What does that mean in terms of, do we have hybrid programming, all sorts of, and one of the things I want to talk about today also is that this isn't a wine fest, W-I-N-E or W-H-I-N-E, okay? We're here to talk about solutions. Our lane is public policy. So how do we take this and lift this up to the state and federal level to address resources that are needed to ensure sustainability for our workforce and for the sector? But we're going to be talking all sorts of things today. So of course, again, rising cost of production, employment, space, rents, if you don't own your space, how much it's increased over the years. Artists are getting pushed out of our cities. We're addressing that in some bills as well. We've got a bill that's going to be on the Senate floor, AB 812, that is designating up to 10% of affordable housing in city, county, and state cultural districts for artists to be able to stay in cultural districts because they're getting pushed out. We've seen a racial and labor reckoning, right? People are no longer going to come to work for $800 for 6 weeks. That's just not going to happen. It's also illegal in the state of California. We're looking at who are we doing this programming for, right? Traditionally, we know who it has been for, who the subscribers have been at our events. Who are we truly doing this work for, and how do we continue to engage and see that this programming is not continue to be just white-centered, and traditional in that way. Wages, benefits, hiring, all of the things that we are looking at in terms of this is a workforce. I think this is a really important point that sometimes we forget when we talk about the arts, right? This is a really important and vital workforce, particularly for the state of California. We are 8% of the state's gross domestic product. We're millions of people employed in the creative industries in the state. And we are the largest population of artists in any state in the union, as well as 25% of the creative industries is here in California. We have vulnerable business models and nonprofit instability. I think there's a lot of people questioning what some people would call the nonprofit industrial complex. And we're looking at what is the nonprofit model? Who does it benefit? Does it benefit the worker? How many of you work in a nonprofit and feel like it benefits the worker? Probably not too many people raising their hands, or going to raise their hands because maybe you're great. Anyway, so I'll raise mine. Okay. Actually, I'm well treated. I just want to say that to my board here. Okay. Historic undercapitalization. We're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to show you some graphs here, and the end of relief funds. We call this a fiscal cliff, right? We stopped the bleeding during COVID, and we'll show you some of the things that we did. But now we're really at the end of a fiscal cliff. And there's some great. I don't know has anyone read this thing that was recently posted called Decomposition Instead of Collapse, Dear Theater, Be Like Soil? Has anyone else seen this? I'm going to make sure everyone gets a link to this. It's a beautifully written conversation about what's going on. There's so many articles happening. We need to build a solidary economy of ideas. Not every idea will work for everyone, not one intervention, but many interventions, not one vision, but many visions. To change everything, we need everyone, and I 100% believe that. So let me just quickly say some of the work that we've done at the state level. I want to thank Tony Atkins and Tony, who's here from her office, in terms of her leadership to help us to get a lot of funding during the height of the crisis. So there was $150 million that went to the California Venues Grant Program. How many people in this room maybe received funding through that? Excellent. There was also $50 million for the California Nonprofit Performing Arts Grant Program, and this was really to specifically help with workforce development, up to $75,000. And then there was a cultural institutions. That was the first thing we got, which was $50 million in the very beginning of the COVID crisis that went specifically to through the California Relief Grant Program to cultural institutions without a cap. So organizations that were over $2.5 million could also get up to $25,000. There was actually $20 million left over. California Office of Small Business Advocate said, we're going to sweep it back into the general fund. We lobbied and said, no. We still need the money in the arts. Let me show you the numbers. They listened, they kept it in that. So many of you may have received an email from Lendustry saying, we want to give you more money and you only have to fill out this one piece of paper, and everyone thinks it's a hoax. It's not. So if that's something that you get an email about, please respond. And if you have any questions, Terry on our team, just going to wave for you right here. If you haven't worked with Terry Ball, she's a miracle worker and she'll help you get through all of these relief grants. So our organization lobbied for it, the California Arts Advocates, and our C3 really helped to provide technical assistance on that. So here's some other things that I'm going to label under workforce strategies. How many of you have heard of SB 1116, Equitable Payroll Fund? Okay, not enough of you have heard about this. This is part of our issue, and this is part of, we got it signed. These are what they call unfunded mandates. In the last several years, we've had two pieces of legislation, one quite historic, the California Creative Workforce Act, first Creative Workforce Development Act in the United States. We were the sponsors of that. Senator Ben Allen was the author of that bill. It passed in January 1st, 2022. Governor signed it in October of 2021. I got the text. I was very excited. It was wonderful. But it has no money attached to it. So it's lovely. It states that creative workforce development is a state priority. That's important language. This is what we call socializing the issues, but it doesn't get us anywhere. Same thing with SB 1116, which was really addressing for small nonprofit performing arts organizations under $2 million, the impact of the change in employment law, right? So many of you went from having independent contractors to everyone on your team having to be an employee. We support that. We want people to be employed. This is how we are going to survive as a sector. People need to have living wages, but we're historically undercapitalized. So you take an organization that is not, no one's making any money in it, and then you're asking them to increase it 40, 60, maybe 75% in your employment costs. What are we going to see? We're going to see a lot of monologues, a lot of 1- and 2-person shows, because that's what people are going to be able to afford going forward. We want to change that. We want to make sure that the arts are ripe, that the arts are vital and vibrant, and continue to be able to provide what they do in all the different ways and services. And we see it really as a public good, right? That's what the arts are doing for our communities. So when we see in the red is advocacy needed, that's where you all come in. There's what we call grass tops and grassroots strategies. Grass tops is part of what lobbyists do with us and with the folks that have the relationships directly with legislators. Grassroots is where we start to influence it by a lot of numbers. So the 4 or 5 people that raised your hand when you heard about SB 1116, we need everyone in this room to know what that is and to advocate on our behalf, our collective behalf. The Creative Core, how many of you are familiar with the Creative Core program? Good, again, we want to see everyone's hand raised. This was the largest single appropriation to the California Arts Council of $60 million. Again, something that we lobbied for. This is both a workforce development solution. This was how to get creative workers back to work. It was distributed to 14 different administering organizations, including the city of San Diego, and with SD-RAC as a partner that got, I think, over $4 million into the county, this whole area, this region, with strategies to employ artists, creative workers, cultural bearers in service to public good, right? So it's a workforce development strategy. It is utilizing a workforce that has historically been underutilized that we know can actually change and transform our communities for the better. And so that's something that has been expended. It's done, one and done. We don't want one and done. We want consistent, sustained funding so that we can really see the transformation. I threw this in this morning when I was like, wait a second, in the middle of the night, we need a slide in here. I need to share with you some information. So this is a graph that really is trying to illustrate where we are in terms of overall funding for the arts in the state of California. So if you look at I'm going to actually walk over. No, I can't do that. So if you look at it down below, in the year 2000, the California Arts Council's budget was $30.7 million. Today, if you look at the yellow over there at the bottom, 2023, 2024, local assistance grants, which are the funding that goes out into communities, right? Not the funding specifically for the overhead of running the agency, or they just got $8 million to do the arts and corrections programs. This is all the different programs that they do. Local assistance grants has remained at $26 million for now 6 years. Now, the good news is it's increased 2,500% because it was $1 million for 10 years, which is why California Arts Advocates really came together in the first place, was to see that change. We've had some one-time funds. I mentioned the $60 million for Creative Core, $40 million for Arts Ed and Creative Youth Development. We had cultural districts. You, of course, know that you're in a cultural district here in Balboa Park. That was a mandate, again, a legislation that was signed in 2015. It took us 7 years to get funding for it, $30 million we got. They clawed back 20 last year, okay? So it reduced from 30 to 10 million, which meant that it cannot expand. The program is just sitting there. So these are the things that we want to affect change. Now, here's the thing we're going to start shaming our legislators around. And yes, Pro Tem, you're going to hear from us about this. We invest, and I say 66 or 99 cents. So 66 cents is if you just account for the actual grants that go out into the field. 99 cents is if you account for the 8 million for arts and corrections. Sorry about the detail, but that's what we have to do, right? And also for the actual staffing, right? So even if let's just say we're talking about just the money that can come into a local community like San Diego, we're talking about 66 cents per capita. That means that's what we're investing in the state of California. Florida is over $2. Tennessee is over $2. New York is over $5. We are lagging behind, okay? So that is something we want to see change. And we say $1, I think it should be $2. We are asking this year, even in a down economy, and what they say is a tightening budget. We totally get that. But what we say, $26 million is what we call budget dust. The California budget is $304 billion. They can find another $20 million and put it into the California Arts Council and make sure that there's more funding for arts in communities like this. Do you agree? Yes. Okay, good. All right. So, I know it's a friendly audience, right? You're like, no, I don't think so. Okay. So here's one of the things we also lobbied for with a number of partners, including Actors Equity and Theater Producers League of Southern California, which is represented here today by Martha Dempson. Raise your hand, Martha. Martha is a tireless, fearless advocate for us at the state level within her own area in Los Angeles as well, and really was the architect, I say, of SB 1116 with Beatrice Castagrin, and then also working with us to fight for what is called a paymaster. How many of you are familiar with what is a paymaster? Okay, cool. So if you essentially a paymaster, this is again addressing the impact of the shift of what's happened in having to make everyone into an employee. When you have an employee, it's not just payroll, right? It's workman's comp, it's unemployment insurance, it's Cal Savers, right? All of these things that you have to know about. A paymaster actually becomes your employer of record, right? So they take on the liability of addressing all of your issues and all of your stuff in terms of your things related to payroll, workman's comp, unemployment. So there was an RFP. Turns out we were the only people who applied for it, but that's okay. And we got the money, and that's because nobody else knew what it was, right? And they're like, "What's a paymaster?" So we are working on putting that out there, offering that. We will actually waive all the onboarding fees for the first, I think, 250 people who enroll in it. That's part of the funding that we received to do that. It will be live soon. This gives you all the different benefits that a paymaster can do for an organization. And if you're interested, we ask that you reach out to us because we are right now assessing who would be interested in all of that. And so it's one of the policy solutions that we came up with in order to address the impact of the employment law change. So let you look at that. We're currently seeing if there's a trademark for CanPay, so don't take too many photos yet. Okay, so I'm going to conclude now, and I'm going to turn it over to a fabulous colleague, Adam Fowler from Civil Economics. Adam has also been one of the main people behind the Otis report, and then was commissioned to work on this specific study around the impact of COVID and all the other conditions on the performing arts sector here specifically in California. And that was funded by Actors Equity, Theater Producers League of Southern California, Arts for LA, and with support from us at Californians for the Arts. So that concludes my portion for now. You'll see me again. Sorry. I'm going to hopefully facilitate a fabulous discussion with everyone, and I'm going to hand it over to Adam Fowler. Thank you.
Good morning.
Right.
It's good to see everyone. I want you to take out your notebooks. You're in economics class now. We're going to talk a little bit about a recent report we've done for performing arts in general. The Otis Creative Economy Report looks at 5 major sectors, some of which have adapted because of their digital components to the pandemic really well. So we have a giant number on the impact of those industries in the state. What's often lost in that is those 5 distinct industries have fared very differently. And so it was worth breaking out and doing a bit of a deep dive in terms of live and performing arts. And so I want to talk a little bit about what's in that report. It's online. Martha can probably tell us where the link is, both at the Actors Equity and Southern California Theater Producers. But there's a lot of important information that I think is really important to think about and maybe frame the conversation today. So before the pandemic, what's actually interesting is we had a really long trend of amazing growth in the state in live and performing arts. As you can see here, going from 2001 up through 2019, the year before the pandemic shut down the economy, we saw roughly a 43% increase in jobs across job type in performing arts. This means folks that were getting a W-2, that were getting a 1099, or doing gig work in some ways. And so there was really a lot of folks working, participating, and that showed up in a number of downstream metrics, total number of firms, both for-profit, nonprofit, that were doing some sort of live event, live theater programming. So we were having a really good trajectory. There had been a lot of work in terms of making that really a part of economic development, workforce development in the state. And we began to see that show up really empirically. Now, what's interesting is when the pandemic comes, that trajectory just gets slammed into a wall. And you can see here, the orange line there at the top is the total economy. This is everything, total GDP in the state. And when you see the second line there, the 19% down, that's performing arts specifically, right? I don't have to tell anyone in the room, this is first out the door in terms of things that were on the do not do list. They've been the last to really come back in terms of a lot of metrics we look at in terms of their behavior. And so what's happened is we've had a recovery, but the performing arts have been left behind in a lot of different regions. And there are regional stories as well. This isn't a California-specific problem, actually. It's very much a global problem. You don't have to do too much of a Google search to see challenges in Dallas. I'm from Los Angeles. This report got a lot more hits once the Mark Taper said, hey, we've got some problems. And everybody's like, wait, what? This is a global and especially a domestic problem in terms of looking at seasons. And Julie hit on a lot of the variables, right? Like with so many things in the pandemic, like the pandemic itself, like pulled back the water so we could see what like some ongoing challenges were under there. And that's what a lot of this is really a changing consumer base in terms of age cohorts that just spend their leisure time and their leisure money differently than historically they have. Commercial leases didn't suddenly change for retail or industrial. Those were doing double-digit growth for a long time before, in especially Southern California. So a lot of the things I think that like got really apparent were there and were problematic for a decade before. When we look in 2019, when we had our performing arts forecast, you can see there by 2021, we estimated that would be at about 330,000 individuals participating in that. What we actually observed in 2021 was 259,000. And I want you to think about that gap because I think it's an important way to frame what the new normal looks like. And so many, I'm sure you've all read so many COVID-related reports where all we're trying to do is like tread water and get back up to where we were the month before the pandemic. That's great. The economy grows year over year, and that just getting back to that point is like actually a really important gap that exists in terms of where we were going with all the other variables. So thinking about not only where were we in January of the year of the pandemic, but where were we expected to be? Where were we forecasted to be on based on where we were going historically? And so that gap is really important. And that gap is, I think about it in terms of like the resources, the talent, the infrastructure is out there. It's just not being utilized for some reason. In economics, we think about potential GDP versus actual GDP, meaning there's a world in which if there weren't obstacles in the way, we could perform better. And there's a lot of variables that go into that. But that is really what the interesting number is here. It is not only getting back up to where we were before the pandemic, but getting back on that relatively good growth trajectory in terms of people experiencing the arts and those businesses and organizations continuing to grow across the state. Now, when we take that missing gap, I think this is what's so interesting, and it puts so many of Julie's numbers, I think, in context, because people get puffed up on $20 million, but that loss of activity is a large loss of activity. You can see there on the left, all in, when we look at our communities where these theaters are, the downstream impacts to the restaurants, the other folks that rely on that foot traffic and activity, we've got about a 29% drop in total employment that is supported from that gap. That's really a huge number. If you look there at the value add, that's the addition to GDP that activity has down about 20%. And there on the right, the state and local tax activity that is lost from that missing activity, a really large number there, and 20% drop. And so, again, as we think about what success looks like, thinking about that historical trend line that we were seeing in California has been really important because especially as the digital economy really continues to take off and opens up markets around the world, our creative activity actually begins to have more of a multiplier impact to our local communities than it just had in an in-person experiential form. So there are countries around the world that are really investing in the creative economy. There are a lot of countries that do industrial policy better than we do in the United States. And folks are seeing that they have an opportunity to bring this activity here. It's just not film and tax credits. It's a whole host of experiential digital activities that folks are trying to poach. You think if you're doing economic development in a community somewhere around the globe, what's easier? To empower creatives with digital tools that are actually pretty available, or the capital investment of building like a manufacturing plant? Like, it's for economic development folks around the globe, it's really quite simple. and the ROI of those digital creative goods is super important. So again, what does this look like? And I apologize for this PDF giving me a little issue here. Over time, we're looking at in 2021 almost $1 billion of lost revenue state and locally. That's important. That happened. That's real. That's not a forecast. That's not modeling. That is observed. And so when you're thinking about this $1 billion that would have gone into coffers because of that activity, suddenly like some of the fixes look very modest and look very doable. And so that we don't think about it because it never existed. And so much in policymaking is like the counterfactual, what didn't happen but could have. And so that $1 billion gap is what's important. If we don't continue to rebound, we see that grow a little bit over time. If we're able to stagnate, if we're able to kind of hold where we are in terms of the human beings we're employing, we're going to continue to add to that because, again, that trend line was growing year over year, and the forecast before the pandemic had growth year over year. So it's not just a stagnant problem. It's we need to both get back and then get the engines going on that trajectory to where we were. I would say a couple things. When you get really granular, and the report is worth reading in full, there's a lot going on under the hood across organizations, as you can see here. The nonprofit theater, I want to flag a little bit. A lot of economic indicators were thrown for a loop during the pandemic because we had both a monetary and a fiscal response that we've never seen in the United States. We had the pandemic unemployment insurance, meaning if you were self-employed, you were almost making back your wages, your pre-laid off wages. And so like we've never seen those folks cared about or taken into account when it comes to unemployment insurance. And so for their ability for their household to continue to spend in our communities was very important. For folks that may have got a PPP loan, right? You might have had some zombie employees that were getting paid and like there wasn't demand for the thing you were doing, but like they were still on the payroll. So there was a lot of weird indicators there. And I say all that to say, even in nonprofit theater, there were some really important differences to flag, I think, in terms of size and how folks are faring. So if you look at that top chunk under average earned income, down if you were below 3 million in revenue, you're down about 70% in your earned. So this is all the ways your nonprofit business model brings in revenue. That could be subscriptions, tickets, tchotchkes, coffee cups, t-shirts, all the things, right? You might have done a Zoom reading, whatever. Down 70%. That's the actual like day-to-day of what the organization does. Greater than 3 million, a little bit more resilient, down 15%. When you look at there across the average total income, you see the same thing. Total's a little different than earned, right? This is all the sources we have coming in. Maybe you've got a great foundation partner. You might have some grants you got in, things that aren't quote unquote earned. Both did a little bit better. Those that had the resources right, the greater than 3 million, they were able to do pretty well because the same with small business. If your banker was plugged in and could get your PPP loan teed up really quick, that you were good to go. And so the resources, California, we love a good bureaucratic infrastructure around things. No shade, I'm an economist, I have to flag some of these things. You know, I always love when things have technical support included. It always makes me cringe a little bit because I'm like, oh God, what is this application going to look like? And I think it shows up there at the bottom, right? It takes a lot of resources to do procurement. You don't initial an amendment, you don't do certain things, like it's over. You've spent a lot of resources that you're not able to get back. And I think that shows up really well there in those really well-resourced organizations that were able to plug in quickly to both federal and state programs, but the smaller folks weren't able quite at the rate those bigger organizations were. In conclusion, this PDF's gonna give me a heart attack. This would go over in an economics presentation. Arts, I hold myself to a higher standard. I apologize. There are some variables I want to flag in other research we're doing that are part of this story that are not just the pandemic. One, I want to say audience are not returning to pre-pandemic levels. That is not a California problem. That is a global problem. There are historical parallels. I think back to New York when the introduction of sound in movies, what used to be Stages for Follies had to do some business model change. Like, there's just lots of examples where the consumer demand, the market mechanisms just change over time. And I think we're at a point where we've got to think through what that means for the business model for a lot of nonprofits. And I'm not a tech person, but those digital and immersive experiences I think are going to be very important. And figuring out how folks that have those resources and understanding can help other smaller organizations will be super important. The other thing I want to flag are demographic shifts. We just have a very different age cohort in California. Baby boomers are retiring, passing away. Historically, when we look at who subscribes, it skews very older and very wider. And so that, those folks are not out in the community, even they're taking part-time jobs, things like that. They've not bounced back or jumped back to their pre-pandemic behavior. And we're seeing that. They're going to theater, just not going to do as much theater. And that matters when they're a big percentage of that kind of denominator in the question. Industry vulnerability, costs have gone up. And it's not just AB5 and like labor and the administrative lift. It's all the things to build a stage, print flyers, etc. So, in economics, the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, gets a lot of press. That's what the actual consumer good, the last thing in the building of the thing costs. There's an additional index, the Producer Price Index, which is like all the parts to put your production on. There's just a whole host from lumber to materials that have just grown really double-digit percentage increases during this period. And they're not, we've stabilized in terms of the growth, but they're sticky at a higher real dollar amount. And so those are questions that are going to rework the budget in terms of what producing shows look like. Workers, again, there's a lot there to talk about. I think that's super important. I would say historically in California, the 99 cents is absolutely right. We are way behind, even though everyone thinks we are the art capital of the world and doing all the right things. We're way behind. We're way behind on a lot of just the ways the arts plug into the state infrastructure, right? I'm from Los Angeles. We're in a strike, SAG, WGA. In New York, if you are on strike, after 2 weeks, you can apply for unemployment benefits. California, you can't. Like, in terms of self-employed paying in to get paid family leave, things like that, we have a program. When you compare it to other states that have similar programs, I think there's 1,000 people that do it in the state, 0.006%. Like, we have, when you look at all the apprenticeship money that's going to community colleges, how many arts programs have a CT or a career technical education certificate? Almost none. So there's a lot of plumbing at the state level that the arts just hasn't historically been baked into, where in a place like New York, it has historically. And I think you see that in those kind of downstream numbers. And there's a lot of work across all of these dimensions to do. So with that, I will turn it back over to the team here, and I'm happy to answer any questions after the panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Adam. I mean, we've heard about policy. We heard a lot about data. I heard $1 billion gap. I heard that, we're behind. I heard we have a new campaign now. 99 cents for the arts, not a penny, right? 99 cents. I don't know if that has the same ring as our campaign here, but very present. So I think how we learn things and retain information are through stories. We can't retain all that data. We got a few data points out of it. It's really the stories, and stories have to come from real people who are dealing with these issues right now. That's why I'm so excited about this panel. We asked Katie McDonald from San Diego Symphony to moderate this panel for a couple of reasons. First of all, she's a vet. She's been through it all.
That means I'm old.
But she runs an important organization that hires a lot of people. And so she understands all this data. She could probably give this report herself. She understands where we are and where we need to go. And I think she's going to tease out of our panel real people who are on the ground right now trying to make this happen. What are we doing right? How are you making this work? What can we learn from you? And where do we go from here? So Katie, come on up and get these panelists introduced.
Why don't my colleagues join us
Yes,
here?
yeah. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And I don't know about you guys, but through all of this, I do feel a little old after all of this. But, I'm just gonna secure my colleagues. morning, all. Do I need this microphone or is my loud, booming voice going to be enough? Thank goodness Tim is here to explain it. Good morning. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank my colleagues here for taking time. I know one of the challenges we all have is taking time for a couple of hours out of our morning sometimes seems like an impossibility when you're thinking about how you're going to get the bills paid and how you're going to get the doors open for your performance. So I thank you all for coming. I think the intention of the Arts Coalition, the California Arts Groups, and the San Diego Regional Arts Groups is to make this both an informational panel, but also an inspirational morning. Let's learn something and let's get inspired, because one of the things we do have in San Diego that I know we all appreciate is a sense of collegiality. And so hopefully we'll get a sense of that today too. So it is my pleasure, as Felicia said, to kind of give us some on the ground sense of some of the good news that is happening out there. We are all in a challenging time, the performing arts, the museums, everybody. But there is a resiliency to San Diego, I think, that we can all benefit from. So we have some wonderful experts on our panel today. And so we're going to start with Jacole Kitchen. Jacole is the Director of Arts Engagement and In-House Casting at the La Jolla Playhouse. As the co-lead of the Learning and Engagement Department, Jacole helps to expand and nurture community partnerships and foster relationships through the greater San Diego community of artists. She has numerous directing credits, from Iron at the Roustabouts Theater, The Music Sounds Different to Me Now at the Playhouse at the WOW Festival, Pick Me Last and Light Years Away as part of the La Jolla Playhouse's Pop Tour, Cardboard Piano at the Diversionary Theater, and Iliad at the New Village Arts, September and Her Sisters, my goodness, you've been busy for a 25-year-old, the Scripps Ranch Theater, and many other productions. In addition, Jacole is a private acting coach and serves as the executive director of the San Diego Performing Arts League. And so she's really wearing two hats on this panel today. Her previous positions have been the casting director and artistic associate for the San Diego Repertory Theater, and bi-coastal talent agent specializing in representation for professional theater actors, directors, and choreographers at Kazarian, Measures, Ruskin, and Associates. So with these two hats, Jacole, share with our audience, how are you functioning? How are you surviving? How are you dealing with the current situation?
Thank you. Hi. I am, as you said, here both representing La Jolla Playhouse and the San Diego Performing Arts League. And I will say, start with, from the perspective of the league, I find a lot of things really encouraging that we're seeing right now. There has been an emergence of a lot of small theater companies in town. A lot of those companies have missions that are focusing on equity for people of color and other marginalized groups. And we are also seeing the ways that the larger theaters are supporting these smaller theaters and helping to lift up in the name and partnering with the other organizations in the name of community of this theater community. One of the things that we saw that was really encouraging, really just this last week, was over the last 4 or 5 years, the San Diego Performing Arts League has taken over the San Diego All City Auditions, which is an opportunity for actors all over San Diego to come and get to audition, to have a moment to audition for all of the performing arts organizations within San Diego. And it was so encouraging. The All Cities just happened this past Monday. And I've been attending All Cities for the last 10 years since I arrived in this community. And I only have so much time. I've been attending All Cities for the last 10 years. I've been helping to organize them for maybe the last 4 or 5 years. And it was so encouraging, not just seeing the diversity of the artists that were auditioning, but how full and diverse the theater artists who were auditing the auditions were. We had Coronado Playhouse just full, and it was just a really beautiful expression. Desiree and I were just saying that we are both currently in an audition process, and both of us have 2 people that we saw at the All City auditions that are currently in processes with us right now. So it's really encouraging to see the way that is happening. The way that a lot of these smaller theater companies are getting creative with the use of spaces, the way that Trinity Rep just took over what used to be Payless Shoe Source in Westfield Mission Valley. I think it's a dream of mine to see Mission Valley become a hub for arts organizations, because there are so many of these small theater companies that are dependent on either the larger companies or renting spaces in 10th Avenue Theater and some of the spaces that are available. That gets really pricey. And because so many are competing for spaces, it's hard to know. You can't necessarily plan your season based on the availability of space. And so it's really encouraging to see creative spaces like that popping up. We are seeing a lot more intentionality in programming, the way that people are programming not just their seasons, but the way they're thinking about casting and the creative teams that they're putting together, who is telling these stories. And as much as an industry, we're seeing stories of theaters feeling like they need to make the safe choice in order to keep their audiences coming. There are really a number of theater companies here in town, both large and small, that are realizing that right now producing theater is a risk in itself. So we may as well do the thing that is exciting and work with the artists that we want to work with and trust that our vision and mission will permeate into the people who trust the art that we're making. And we're seeing that, I think that a lot of the theaters are seeing that paying off. We're also seeing a lot of changes in leadership that is really exciting. At a lot of the theaters, big and small, you're seeing a lot of the diversity happening. Desiree will talk about, she just took over Moxie, but it was so exciting to be part of that search committee and to be talking about who are the leaders that are going to be running our theater companies. And I know that I'm talking about a lot of how the theaters have been diversifying, but as was talked about in both of the presentations that we've seen already here this morning, we have to expand on who is involved in creating the theater and making the decision and doing the decision making, because that's going to help expand who feels welcome in the theater. And that's literally the only way that this community is going to continue to thrive. So that's the perspective that I see from my purview of the Executive Director of Performing Arts League, where I get to just see a little bit of everything that's going on. But I'm also super encouraged by what's happening at the Playhouse. I have to say, Adam, I'm so grateful for your presentation. As an art maker, an economic presentation doesn't always necessarily support what I believe, but there was, because I don't go on logic, I go on heart, I go on instinct. But there was so much, it's so true. And so because we are a large organization, there is maybe an assumption that we are not facing the same things that all of the organizations are. But I appreciated so greatly you saying that no, the larger resourced organizations are facing the exact same things. We just have some larger teams that are able to go in and help find solutions, which I think is what the Playhouse has done really, really well. We've worked together with our board, our philanthropy team, our finance team, general management to find creative, collaborative solutions to maximize the fundraising opportunities. We were very blessed because we were able to get in there early. We were able to use our stimulus funds to, yes, support those of us at the Playhouse, but to continue supporting artists through our WOW festival. We switched to digital WOW to be able to keep employing artists. Our Pop Tour is our touring youth program that has been core to the Playhouse for 25 years. And when we knew we couldn't tour schools with it, there was never a moment of, okay, well then we can't do the Pop Tour. The question was, well then how do we do the Pop Tour? And we used those resources to help shift, and we were able to film it, to be able to keep employing artists and to keep making art, even when we weren't able to do that on our stages. And we just continue to go on mission. Like there's never been a point where in programming we felt that we had to veer from our mission. We've actually doubled down and deepened our commitment really to the community through arts engagements programming, fully in the last 3 years, fully forming what is now the Learning and Engagement Department at La Jolla Playhouse. We always had an education and outreach department, but really made that shift to make it all cyclical and receptive, because Anyway. But one of the main changes that I've seen that I think is really exciting for what we have been doing is because we have this commitment to commitment and core programming, we have so many cool things that we're doing. So rather than going out and looking for grants to find new things to do, we're talking about the art that we're doing. And then our fundraisers, our philanthropy department is looking for grants that support that. And so now we're having these monthly cross-departmental grant meetings where folks from every department sit down in the room, and our philanthropy department goes through everything that's come across their desk, going, okay, this is a grant that we're looking at. This looks like this. I feel like this could support that program. What do you think? And then artistic goes through. Here's everything that we're working on. I think that could fit into this. And we're just communicating. And really, a lot of this came from catalyzing engagement, which was part of a program that us and the Globe and 15 other arts organizations got to take part of through the NCAF grant. And so we've just had a lot of opportunities to be able to double down on what we're doing and then find a way to support that. So we're always leading with the art, which I think is really exciting. And by doing that, that's allowed us to make our pop tour completely free to schools. Last year was our first year where the WOW Festival was completely free to anyone in the community, and our student matinees are free. We're also realizing that a lot of the engagement stuff that's the most impactful is also the least expensive. Two of our programs are programming with the veterans and our programming with Voices of Our City Choir, which services folks experiencing homelessness. The cost of those programs are essentially our teaching artists and meals or snacks. It's so lo-fi, but the impact that we're having. And so we're leading with impact, leading with art, leading with partnerships, because like Velma Kelly, we can't do it alone. And so we're finding different people to partnership, not just with the arts engagement stuff, but even with our season. We have Sumo coming up that we're partnering with Mai Theater Company. We're finding the people who are doing the cool things that we want to be doing and saying, hey, let's do that together. And the last thing that I'll say, I talked about we're taking risks with, that a lot of the companies are taking risks with programming. I would say that Is It Thursday Yet was one of the biggest risks that we've taken as of recently. And I say that not because we didn't believe in it, but because it wasn't written when we decided that we wanted to do it. But we believed in these artists and we believed in the community that we wanted to serve through this program. And it paid off in ways that we never could have imagined. And so I'm so proud of this community and to be part of an organization that is finding these collaborative, creative ways to continue to thrive in what really could be a crisis for our entire industry.
I'm so sorry that Nicole isn't as enthusiastic as we were hoping. Do you need another cup of coffee?
I don't even drink coffee.
You're so fantastic. My sense is there will be some questions from the audience. So if you do have some questions, I think the best thing is to write them down on a piece of paper and bring them up to Felicia, and we'll handle those questions at the end. So thank you, Nicole. Fantastic. Javier Velasco currently serves as artistic director of the San Diego Ballet, having created more than 100 original pieces for the company since its inception, including more than 20 ballets to commissioned scores by resident composers David Burge, Charles McPherson, and Gilbert Castellanos. He has supplied dances for productions of the La Jolla Playhouse, the Old Globe, and has a long-standing relationship with the San Diego Repertory Theater, where he has staged productions of A Christmas Carol, Cabaret, Hairspray, Tommy, In the Heights, Evita, and many others. He has enjoyed many long creative relationships, having worked with Luis Valdez on the 20th anniversary production of Zoot Suits, Bandido, and Corridos, composer Steve Gunderson on the premieres of Suds in New York, Dixie Highway, Back to Bacharach and David in New York, Everybody's Talking, and 33 1/3 House of Dreams in San Diego. Most importantly, Mr. Velasco wrote and directed The Toughest Girl Alive, which premiered at the Moxie Theater and had a successful run at the New York International Fringe Festival. Mr. Velasco was part of the initial cohort of artists awarded a Creative Catalyst Fellowship by the San Diego Foundation to create new work. And we're so pleased that you could join us today.
Thank you. Oh, now I have to follow that. Very advertised.
I did give you the hardest
That's it. No, it's all good. It's all good. So a few things. I always like, these may not be the best of times. They may not be the worst of times, but they're the times we have. This is where we are. If we want to be artists, this is the time we have to make art. We were the ones who have to make art during COVID. We didn't have a choice. But if you want to make art, then that's what you do. There's a whole different world between fine art, commercial art, and those of us who work in the non-for-profit art sector. You know, what was the slide that started this whole thing? Crisis, whatever. If you don't want to be working in crisis, don't work in the non-for-profit art sector, because you will always be working in crisis. That's just it. So a lot of times when people would ask us, well, how are things going now in COVID? It's like, well, same as before. It's like we're trying to figure out how we're making payroll. We're trying to figure out what we're going to do from year to year to year. All this kind of stuff. So that whole idea of us being organizations that aren't used to working in crisis mode, that's what we do, and that's what I've been doing for 33 years. I think, important things to think about, when COVID came along, mirroring a lot of what Nicole said as far as, going back to mission. Our mission is to excite, enrich, and entertain our diverse audience through an imaginative presentation of quality classical and contemporary dance. So that giving something to our audience, that was our mission. And going back to that when COVID came around, we actually are not being an organization that has a home space. I'm the only one up here, I think, that doesn't have a home space. No, Moxie?
Well, I guess sort of.
Yeah, you have a theater. You rent, but you have a home space. It was a different thing. All of a sudden now, not only because we have to always, start from scratch every year to figure out where we're going to be performing. So now we were just in a situation where, well, we're not going to be performing indoors. We're going to have to take everything outdoors. And actually, in a town like San Diego, that is not necessarily the worst of things to do. There are other cities in the world that don't have the same opportunities that we have. And because we're on the lovely Liberty Station campus, there were lots of places that we could take our stuff outdoors. I think the most important thing as we were moving about was just being in contact. Nicole was talking about all this kind of organizational collaboration that's going on. I don't have a development team, and I don't have I don't have those kind of things, as I'm sure a lot of you out there don't. But you do have a community, and you do have patrons, and you do have people that you work with. And for us, just keeping that open and making sure that we were receptive to what our patrons community needed was the most important thing during the COVID crisis, and continues to be. Very soon after it all started, we knew, because unlike these other organizations, we also have a school. So we are in very close contact with a lot of our patrons on a daily basis. On a daily basis, we talk to the people who we serve directly, And we knew we had to put a Nutcracker out there. Somehow we needed to do some sort of Nutcracker, not just for the outside community, but for the community that works with us. And these people needed something. It wasn't just us, but these people needed something to get their kids out of the house. They needed some kind of holiday something. So we were actually the first organization in all of the United States who came up with the idea of a drive-in Nutcracker. And it got national attention. We were in the New York Times. We had, it wasn't CNN, but one of those national, networks came in and filmed us and did the whole kind of thing. Was it the greatest Nutcracker in the world? No. Was it a Nutcracker that I would want it? No. Were they socially distanced? Yes. Did all of that kind of stuff? 50 years from now, will some of those little kids who've been doing Nutcracker for, who were probably in 10 Nutcrackers from the time they were 3 till the time they're, 16, will they remember all those other Nutcrackers? No. But they will remember the drive-in Nutcracker. That they will remember. And a lot of people who go see those shows, won't remember some of those other things, but they will remember sitting in their car, watching the little kids out there doing their thing, with 50 other cars. So that is what our community needed at the time. So we were flexible, willing, knew that that was the best thing, and I'm not saying this in a facetious way, that was the best thing that we could give our community at that time. And it fit within our mission to excite, enrich, and entertain our diverse audience, all of that stuff, it fit within. But we just needed to be open to the idea of that. And we continue to need to be open to those ideas. As we used to perform at the Lyceum, which is not there and won't be there for a long time, depending on what happens. So we now, all of our presentations are happening throughout the San Diego community. We're at the Previs, we're here, we're da-da-da. But every time we go to some place, we don't just look at it as a sort of drop in. We look at it as a new collaboration. And when we talk to them and we say, what can we do for you? How can we make this work for you? It's something that we've always done with our education outreach programs, is that we are very open, not just open, but when we go to a new library, we're going to be doing something. We have a meeting with them. We say, look, these are programs we offer. We offer this, 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 and this. But let's put that off the table. What do you need? What do you need? Because it doesn't matter if we have the greatest, lecture demonstration in the world. If that's not what their community needs, it's not serving their purpose. And then we're not really building something there. So I think for me, I'll cut this short, and if anyone wants to hear, whatever.
More wisdom.
More wisdom, whatever. I mean, for me, the main thing is, being flexible, understanding your community, understanding what patrons is even a word I don't really like using that much, actually, because it sort of denotes, that there's some sort of money coming across there. The people who you serve, who we have all, how many of us here are with non-for-profit arts groups? We made a pact, not to just serve. Sometimes I get to do ballets that just serve me and serve my, this is just for me, whatever, and then sometimes we'll do ballets where we know we do Nutcracker, bring in the money, right? All those kinds of things, sometimes you know that. But really, the pact that we've served, the thing that we have decided to do is, as not-for-profit arts groups, is we're here to better the community. That's what we are here to do. And some artists aren't. And that's one other thing I'd like to bring up is, all of these talks always tend to be centered around this sort of not-for-profit art groups, usually theaters. But the arts sector is much larger than that. We just did a wonderful granting process where we were able to give people who were really more involved with fine arts, opportunities to get, not San Diego Ballet, but that's right, So we have fine artists, we have commercial artists. So it's this sort of larger group, I think, that we generally will focus on. And, the last thing I'll say before I turn this over is, I've been a very ton of it. The one thing that I wish when we would have these convenings that we would actually do is talk more about art. We all came here because we want to be artists. And this is nothing against the economics of this or the job, whatever, or the politics of this or whatever. But we very rarely will have any talk about actually creation of art, what art means to us. We never really talk in artistic terms, and that's, to me, that's a little sad, that as artists, whenever we come together, the last thing we actually talk about is art.
So that it does feel like, I think someone started out our time together this morning talking about the difference between whining and wine. And maybe the second wine would be a good rally round this idea of wonderful talking about art and getting together for a different kind of convening. So San Diego, let's think if we can do something like that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Javier. What wisdom we have. We have wisdom in San Diego, and then we also have very new and young and wonderfully excited new leadership in San Diego. So Desiree, we're so glad you're here. Desiree Clark Miller is the Executive Artistic Director of Moxie Theater. She received her BFA in acting from AMDA College and Conservatory of the Performing Arts and is also a graduate of the British American Drama Academy. She directed Monsters of the American Cinema at Diversionary Theater, Mother of the Maid and Chronicles of Kalki at Moxie Theater. Desiree spent nearly 10 years as a teaching artist, specializing in devised theater for under-resourced and underrepresented people. Desiree currently sits on the board of directors for the Palm Springs Young Playwrights Festival and will be directing Man and Moon at Moxie Theater during their 19th season. She's also in the process of devising and directing a production for Voices of Our City Choir, a partnership between the Moxie Theater and the La Jolla Playhouse, another one of these good collaborative efforts. Desiree, we're so glad you could join us.
Thank you. I'm not as good at talking off the cuff like these people, so I prepared something to say to you all today. So good morning. My name is Desiree Clark Miller, and I am the new Executive Artistic Director at Moxie Theater. It is an honor to be here with you all today to represent Moxie and to tell you a bit about our theater, its mission, and what we are doing to attract new audiences and to keep our doors open. Moxie is a professional nonprofit theater located in the Rolando community, better known as the College area here in San Diego, and was founded in 2004. Our mission is to create more diverse and honest images of women plus for our culture using the intimate art of theater. Through our production of plays written by Women Plus, educational programs, annual Moxie Awards ceremony, and career launching professional opportunities, Moxie is creating a pipeline for Women Plus's work and inspiring audiences and other art institutions to create change in their own communities. Moxie is considered to be a mission-based nonprofit theater. This means that we don't just do any play that comes across our desk, but we produce plays that represent our mission and serve to strengthen our community. This, among many other aspects, is what makes Moxie unique in comparison to other theaters, not only in San Diego, but around the US. For example, the first show of our current season, Cry It Out by Molly Smith Metzler, focuses on the dynamics of new parenthood. Thus, in serving our mission, Moxie has made this show not only mom, but baby friendly, including nursing stations not only in our lobby, but in the theater itself. This type of inclusion is what keeps folks coming back to Moxie. We have been partnering with schools to allow students who might not otherwise have the opportunity to see live theater to come to our shows for free. And I'm sure you're thinking, of course, everybody does student matinees. But what those theaters aren't doing is showing students representation of themselves and their experiences on stage. A teacher from a recent Moxie production of the Chronicles of Kalki said, quote, "I hope you know what this show and the non-binary and queer representation on stage meant to my students, not to mention the BIPOC representation. My girls had never seen themselves on stage in many things we had gone to see in town, because even when there are queer or BIPOC actors, they're not free telling queer and BIPOC stories." End quote. Our hope is that these students, their parents, and friends equate Moxie with being an inclusive and fun place that is worth revisiting time and again. We also hope to push forward a new internship program next year that would give these same students the opportunity to get professional experience working at our theater, thereby making them hireable technicians and designers by the time that they graduate. This is how we revolutionize theater. Now, this form of engagement is fairly common, as previously stated, but it all comes down to, as we've been stating, the art. And at Moxie, we are fearless. We do not aim to serve an audience in a traditional way, but to challenge patrons to think differently about everyday life and the way that they engage in society. In the current cultural moment and theatrical climate, that means welcoming new folks into our space. It means making theater not only accessible to a younger audience and lower income folks, but also making it an enticing, not to be missed experience for a post-COVID population that would rather stay at home. American Theater Magazine recently stated, quote, "Most of these researchers and consultants corroborated what we've been hearing anecdotally for the past year, that when audiences do consider going to the theater, by and large, they are craving fun, diversion, celebration, spectacle, uniquely theatrical material they can't easily get at home." The leaders of Atlanta's Alliance Theater recently hailed their successful A Christmas Carol, but also told us that Katori Hall's Pulitzer Prize winning The Hot Wing King was a box office hit in February. The Repertory Theater of St. Louis reported a similar pattern with their February show, Dominique Morisseau's Confederates. It is not as if experimental work isn't thriving in the right environment. At New York City Soho Rep, their spring show, Public Obscenities, a new multilingual play by Shayok Misha Chaudhry, extended several times and had standby lines down the street every night. What this article tells me, and should be telling theaters across the country and throughout our great state, is that it is challenging material, told well, in an exciting and truly engaging or immersive way that is captivating new audiences. I would also like to point out that all of the shows mentioned above, except for A Christmas Carol, were written by people of color and 2 by women. Moxie embraces our mission down to the core, from the way we handle office duties to the way we produce shows and cultivate donors. We strive to pay artists a competitive wage, and though we may not have a state-of-the-art facility that others have, the funding for a splashy renovation or seasons loaded with high-profile performers, it is theaters like ours that will change the framework of the way that shows are produced in the future. It is theaters like ours that will train the new generation of Women Plus and prepare them to step into the world professionally with guts, resilience, independence, and tenacity. And it is theaters like ours that will cultivate new audiences and send them into the communities in search of similar theatrical experiences. We are struggling, as others are, but we believe that with persistent moxie, our houses will fill up in time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So one of the joys of a role like being a moderator is you get to chat with these speakers before a panel like this. And Desiree and I had a wonderful conversation yesterday, and she said to me, "I'm a little bit nervous." I said, "Oh, don't be nervous." Did she seem nervous? Oh my goodness, fantastic. We're so glad to have you in this new role. Congratulations. Tim Shields, thank you for having us here today, is, as we know, the managing director of the Old Globe. He's been here since 2017. In his time in San Diego, he has enjoyed becoming involved in the community and has done so quickly. He currently serves as a board member of the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce's LEAD program, an advisory board member of the San Diego Downtown Partnership, and vice president of the Balboa Park Cultural Partnership. He brings to San Diego many decades, we're so glad to have him in town, of not-for-profit theater experience. He was managing director of Princeton, New Jersey's McCarter Theater Center from 2009 to 2017. He was in Milwaukee at the Repertory Theater there from 1998 to 2009, and the Jiva Center in Rochester, New York from 1992 to 1998. He has also held administrative positions at Children's Theater Company in Minneapolis, the Denver Center Theater Company, and the McCarter Theater Center in an earlier period of his career. He has served as president of the League of Resident Theaters and as vice president of the board at the Theater Communications Group. He has been the chair of the Art Pride New Jersey Board, a member of the Milwaukee's Latino Arts Board, and a board member of the Cultural Alliance of Greater Milwaukee. He holds a BFA in drama production from Carnegie Mellon University in his hometown of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Lots and lots of experience. We have so much wisdom at this table. Tell us what's happening at the Globe.
Happy to. I usually when I respond to that introduction, I say this witness protection program has worked out just fine so far. Nobody has quite caught up with me yet, but if you see me looking over my shoulder, you'll know why. That's what's going on. You know, this whole question of the arts ecosystem and the performing arts ecosystem as it emerges from the pandemic is just a fascinating one. It's fascinating here locally, it's fascinating nationally. You've all seen articles in various publications, whether it's the New York Times or the Washington Post, or even in things, the trade publications, Variety, American Theater, decrying where we find ourselves as a field and saying and pointing out all the great difficulties and all the great perils that we all face in just trying to do the thing that our organizations were put here in the community to do, to produce great art for the citizens of the community. And all that's true. But I want to be a voice that actually focuses on the possibility of what the future looks like and the possibility of continuing on and building to that, back to the pre-2019 arc of where the field seemed to be headed. At the Globe, during the pandemic, we did many of the things that the other organizations that have already spoken here today tried to do. We tried to make sure that we produced art and continued to be relevant to the public and pushed through as many different channels as we could. Yes, podcasts. Yes, Zoom presentations. We had Bill Irwin write a 10-minute play specially for Zoom and push that out. We put a production of Hamlet on the radio out with KPBS. We did, even at the holiday season, Grinch on the radio, if you can believe that. We helped make sure that audiences could find that. So we did all that. But while we did all that, we tried to make sure that we took care of the people of the Globe staff, and we kept as many employed as we possibly could. And we never got lower than 85 full-time staff people, at the lowest end of our staff count, from a staff count that on normal times is about 120. As we sit here today, the Globe has about 120 full-time staff people. During the peak of the season, as I was describing earlier from the podium. And by the way, it's Crime and Punishment, a comedy that's going on downstairs that somehow I never found my way to mention. Crime and Punishment, a comedy. If you never thought it could be a comedy, trust me, it is. In any case, we have, during the peak of our season, another couple of hundred people who are either seasonal, full-time seasonal, or part-time that help the Globe do what it does across the community. I also want to make clear that what the Globe does in the community isn't just what happens in our 3 stages. That our own arts engagement effort, yes, through the NCAP program and the Irvine Foundation that funded that so generously over the 6-year arc of their involvement here in the state of California, was a catalyst for helping that happen at the Globe, just as it did at the Playhouse and the other organizations. But really the reach and depth of the variety and styles of those programs, whether it's here on our campus in a variety of ways that we bring people to this campus to be served for free with programming, a monthly gathering on our plaza and our Access program, or whether it's in with incarcerated populations, or whether it's high school students here in a Pam Farr Summer Shakespeare Studio. The variety of ways that we reach into the public are all ways that we're trying to say to our public, having an organization like the Globe in your community is something that is of value. And the value proposition isn't only if you can afford to buy a ticket. There are a variety of ways to consider that. So we, as we look to our future, are continuing to try to double down on that, are continuing to try to say to our community, we're here for you in all the ways that you would want us to be wherever you are in the community, and are working hard to do that. So the challenges for the Globe are as follows. Yes, a budgetary one. We're currently functioning in a way that isn't sustainable over the long haul, and we recognize that the imbalance between the expense level that we're at right now and the resources that we can generate in any one year needs to be addressed. The reason for that shortfall at the Globe is in 2 dimensions. One, philanthropy that has gone to some other places during this time of societal change. And second, season ticket audiences that are at a lower level than they were pre-pandemic. Interesting, at least for the Globe, is that single ticket business has rebounded on a show-by-show basis. As many people are coming to see shows here as ever did. But what's not quite back are the level of season ticket holders. So we're going to, in our plans for the future, going to double down on saying, well, is there a world where we can get back some of that season ticket business? Is there a world where we can reorganize our philanthropy department in a way that makes the case for the Globe, its role in the community, and how we do what we do in a better way that will attract more philanthropic support? Right after Labor Day, you're going to see the Globe do something I hope you'll see if you're here in the community. The Globe do something it's never done, which is to begin to promote itself in a way that isn't show specific. We're going to go beyond simply saying, here's a show at the Globe, come see it. So yes, you'll continue to see those ads. You'll see ads for Cabaret. You'll see ads for Mary Weiss and Windsor. You see ads for our shows. You see ads for The Grinch. But what you'll see also are institutional ads that say this following message to the community. The Globe is a theater that lives beyond the stage. And that message about living beyond the stage and being impactful to more people in the community is the message that the Globe wants the community to think of when they think of the Globe. As I go around the community and introduce myself as being a person who works at the Old Globe, most times that people recognize it at all, they say, oh, you're the guys that do The Grinch. And that's great. That's fabulous. We love that support. We're going to want to do The Grinch for a long, long time to come. But we're so much more than that. And we want to tell that story. And when we tell that story, the hope is that the community will respond with first, oh, I didn't know that. And then second, oh, if I knew that, I'd support it in a different way. Either by showing up and actually buying a ticket for a show and or deciding that what we do is worthy of contribution. So we think that over the next 3 or 4 years that we're capable of getting back to a stasis, back to a place where our ambitions for our programs, our programming, and how we want the community to support us all can be met, all can be brought together into a circle. So that's where the Globe finds itself.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm finding this very, very inspiring, and I'm quite optimistic given the good news happening. Share a little bit about the symphony. Is there something specific about the symphony? Well, the San Diego Symphony, as many of you may know, is the oldest symphony in the state of California, which I think is surprising to people. We're going to go back and try and figure out who were those people at the beginning of the last century that figured out that San Diego deserved and needed a symphony orchestra before any other city in the state of California. So we have to understand that, especially at a time when civic leadership seems so critical to the future of San Diego. So I'll say a couple of things about the symphony, but then we don't have much time left. And so maybe one question. Okay, so we'll get to that. But the symphony, we've been, it was good news and bad news. We started planning and construction of the Rady Shell at Jacobs Park just before COVID. There was a night when Martha Gilmer, our CEO, and I were in tears because the governor had shut down construction and we had just started bulldozing around the Embarcadero Marine Park South. And then at the last minute, he called about 11:30 at night that we got a call from our construction team saying that the governor had made construction work a necessary employment for the state. And so we were able to continue. So we were quite fortunate during that time that during the COVID period, we, as the Globe did, kept as many staff on, full time as possible. And we built the Rady Shell during that time. And so it ended up being a very positive time for us because when we did come back, we were outside and a lot of people felt more comfortable psychologically being outside. So we were quite fortunate in that way. Fortunate enough that we were able to open in the summer of 2021, and it has been a joy to watch San Diegans and people from around the country come to that site, which I think celebrates the performing arts, celebrates music, celebrates San Diego at its core. There's something about walking out on that piece of land with the water surrounding us and the Navy on one side and Tijuana on the other, and the downtown busyness that for me feels quintessential San Diego. So we are taking that good fortune, and as you know, we are in the midst of renovating Jacobs Music Center at 7th and B. That is a challenging time to be under construction, as we all know, but we will get there, and it will be a beautiful, beautiful contribution to the civic life of San Diego. So things are very challenging to the La Jolla Playhouses, and the statement earlier. Big organizations struggle like everybody else does. I mean, as it's our budgets may be bigger, but our challenges remain as challenging.
Or bigger.
Or bigger,
Organization scale,
that's
so do the problem.
when I worked in New York and then I was coming to San Diego, one of my bosses said, Katie, it's only a matter of zeros. And it's true. All arts organizations, despite, regardless of the size of their budgets, struggle with fundamental things. So let me ask this one quick question and then, a couple final thoughts here. There are a lot of questions here. Is there, how about this? The US and Canada are not in a recession, but the performing arts sector is. Multiple quarters of negative growth. What can be messaged at national, state, and local level about pulling the sector out of a recessionary cycle? This feels like a conference unto itself.
Yeah.
It does. So, I'm going to hold off on that question because I think we won't do it justice. There is one big civic issue before us that I would just like to put out on the table. There are questions right now at the center of our city in downtown San Diego about the revitalization of our civic center and about what is going to happen at City Hall and the Civic Theater, and there are people here from the Civic Theater. Really quickly, what is your sense of the importance of having a civic theater as part of the center of San Diego? And is there some messages that we as the arts groups ought to be getting to our elected officials and other civic leaders about that?
Yeah, could I just talk about that for a second? You go to Florence and there's the lovely center where, there's a lovely center that's like the heart of the city. You go to all of these, you go to Baku, in Azerbaijan, and there's this lovely promenade where the people walk by, and it's like, so, you have, there's the heart of the city there. So we have this heart of the city in San Diego that we need to decide what we're going to do with it. I'm not even promoting the fact that it needs to be an arts center, but somebody has to make some decision as to what is going to happen with that part of San Diego. Somebody, we need to make that decision as to what's going to happen. And I just want to say, I think it should be an arts center, but just anecdotally, I was walking by because we were in the Balboa. So I was walking by all that construction where they were showing, what was going to be happening in Horton Plaza, whatever. And there was this drawing. There was a drawing of what they wanted Horton Plaza to look like. And I looked at it and I said, not one of the 3 existing theaters that is already on that site is on that drawing. The amphitheater was not there. It was turned into grass. The Lyceum, which is there, was paved over. The Balboa Theater building was there, but it was missing the Balboa Theater sign. So what is that telling you about the priorities of the people who are making that downtown? Now, we had a very nice meeting of like 2 weeks earlier about the whole arts district and whatever. But the fact that, they would allow something like that to be posted for everyone to see, where the 3 existing theaters have been blotted out and nothing is in place, really speaks to something to me. You said that San Diego Symphony is the oldest symphony in California. The old San Diego Ballet, I believe, was the first organization to be granted any money to tour in the state of California. Wow. We have the Old Globe, right? We have all of these organizations that really make San Diego like the birthplace of the arts in California. But no one thinks of San Diego as the birthplace of the arts in California. Why is that?
Well, so I think this is a perfect way to transition to our final speaker. But there was great enthusiasm at the turn of the century to build Balboa Park, and turn of the last century, to build Balboa Park and to start a San Diego Symphony and to build downtown. And you look at the Civic at our city hall now that was built, Brandon was telling me, 1965, right? With the Civic Theater as the centerpiece of that. And there was sculpture out from the San Diego Museum of Art that was out on that wonderful promenade. It had arts at its center. So there have been times in the history of our city that important arts organizations, important civic decisions with arts as part of those civic decisions that were made. And it does feel like a time when it's very important for the civic leadership, all of us, to really be paying attention and to step up and share the vision of what the city can be. We're at kind of a critical place. And when I look back at what you all have said, returning to your core missions during this time of crisis, being flexible, thinking about the diversity of our city, thinking about the diversity of programming to match the diversity of that city. And most importantly, this word I heard when I was talking to my colleagues, not shrinking. Now is not the time to shrink. Now is the time to think big and be visionary. So thank you all for sharing your insights, and thank you for organizing.
I want to thank our panelists and our moderator. That was really interesting. And there were definitely a lot of common threads that I heard as well. And I just want to also share that today is being recorded. Thank you. And also that everything that has been presented will be available slide decks you'll be able to download. We'll send it to you as well. We were going to have more of a discussion. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. And again, you are guinea pigs on this event, so we are learning from you. So thank you for allowing us that opportunity. We did want to think about some of these questions. How can we learn from this moment, which I think all of you are discussing, back to your being very focused on mission, on engagement, on case making. I didn't really hear much about, obviously I think philanthropy is a big piece of it. I didn't hear a lot about public funding in the panel, in the conversation. Obviously that's a lane we're very focused on. Be curious to hear more from everyone about that. Again, what do we need from private funders, from public policy to create sustainability? Because again, when I came in, said, "Oh, crisis. We've been in crisis before. Remember 2008? Remember the 90s? Remember this?" Anyone who's been in it long enough has said we've been here. But really, what we're all trying to achieve is how do we? Maybe we can always exist in crisis, and we're good at being resilient. But how do we actually effectively create sustainability? And how do we create sustainability for the folks that have never had those opportunities to be in this sector, and for the voices that we are hearing at theaters like the Moxie and all the wonderful stuff that everyone here is doing? So, and what does that look like, right? There are a lot of different business models that people are thinking about, more about collectives, more about cooperative models, not maybe necessarily being so dependent upon philanthropy as well. Distributed leadership models, things that I think a lot of us are trying to reimagine at this time of what could we be versus what have we been. And so I invite all of you to engage with us as well, because again, part of what Adam mentioned in terms of public policy, when we look at it, the strike, for example, in New York, there is actually a bill being introduced, I think this week, by Senator Portantino and Laura Friedman, Assemblymember Friedman, addressing this issue around after 2 weeks you don't get unemployment in California. So you can influence public policy, right? That is our work. That is why we apparently live in this country, right? Is that we can affect this level of change. And so I really challenge all of you to think in that way, not only for your own institutions, your own organizations, your personal self, but for the greater community good, because I think that is why we all get up in the morning and do our work in the arts, is that we are trying to transform communities. Public policy has a role in that if we engage. If we don't engage, it will be done for us. We want to do it with us, right? One of the things I just want to address too, and again, I'm really encouraged to be hearing that things are, people are feeling strong in this moment. We don't have individual artists necessarily on the panel today. We didn't hear from we heard from organizations. We didn't hear from the arts worker. In the same way, we all are arts workers, but in the same way, we may want to address it from a different perspective as well. And that's something we want to think about. When we were shut down, Californians for the Arts put together a Reopening Arts Safely task force. We had about 50 people statewide addressing how to reopen. That actually allowed us to influence the reopening at the state level. And that's something maybe we need a statewide task force to address. What does the future, how can we reimagine? And I know this is going on in many different rooms and in many different ways. And if it's not necessary for us to do it, we will gladly step aside and listen to the other people doing this work. I'm just posing the question. And then how should our collective messaging evolve to ensure we are being seen, heard, and changing systems for the better, right? We don't want to necessarily go back to the way it's always been. We want to think about the future. And again, there's so many articles, but I've been reading a lot of them. And so one of this is just a recent one on August 9th in the Washington Post. And she says, for theaters we know it to have any future at all, a new economic model must take its place. founded on a simple principle: fund artists directly. Then let the artists produce their own work, rent their own venues, and pay their own collaborators. So some getting the clap here for that. And again, there's no one solution. We all are going to have to figure out what works for our own communities, for our own organizations, for the people, as you said so eloquently, you serve, right? Who are you? That's what we are here to do as nonprofits. We are public benefit corporations, right? That is why we exist. So just a couple of quick things from our lane, again, in terms of advocacy specifically. We weren't able to get something in the budget this last year, even though we lost the $20 million for cultural districts and we didn't see increase on that funding overall. We were able to get $1 million in the budget, again, what they call very much budget desk in a $304 billion budget. But this is actually to address, again, the future. What are we thinking about in terms of the future of the creative workforce here in the state of California? What do we need to create in terms of social safety net solutions? Things like portable benefits. If you're a gig worker, right? Pandemic unemployment assistance was done during the crisis, during pandemic at the federal level. Why can't we continue to look at systems like that? Other things along those lines. And so this is now being housed at the California Arts Council under Director Jonathan Moscone's leadership. And this will be an overall state strategic plan for the creative industries across multiple agencies. We worked very closely these last several years with the Small Business Administration. And I actually had a really excellent conversation with their director, Tara Lynn Gray, recently. And I was just illustrating some of the things from the study that Adam had shared with us. I mean, not only have we lost a significant amount of jobs, but that downstream economic impact is huge, right? So I think the statistic is for every 100 jobs in the performing arts, there's 157 downstream jobs. In other words, restaurants, caterers, porta potties, all of the different things that happen when you put on a performing arts event. And when I said this to her, first of all, her eyes went, oh, okay, that's really important data. She was like, you need to use that one, right? Number one. And number two, I said, stop thinking about this as an arts problem. This is not an arts problem. This is a community economic development problem. If there was any other industry that came to you and said, here's a loss, $1 billion in loss. I mean, how much, what's the numbers in tax revenue loss? I can't remember. I mean, economic impact, huge, right? What would the state do in terms of capitalization strategies to ensure that this industry gets back on its feet and not only just survives, but thrives, right? Because we know all of the impact that you're making in terms of every one of you talked about your engagement strategies. You talk about your engagement strategies because you know that it's not just about butts and seats. That's a critical component. But it is about how are we influencing people to think differently, right? So those are some of the things that we think about in terms of case making. Oh, I got that quote in there twice. I guess I really like that quote. The other thing that we're working on too is for the first time ever, we've had the opportunity to have a working group at the California Economic Summit. And again, I know you were saying that, let's talk about the making art. Let's not just talk about economy. Let's not talk about jobs. Obviously, when you're talking to people and elected officials, yes, they want to talk about the last show they saw or the music that they love, et cetera, and so on. But at the end of the day, their job is to ensure that there are jobs, food on the table, people have shelter, people have health insurance, and all of those things. So we need to speak in those terms as well to ensure that we are seen as part of the solution, right? We're not here to say we need a handout. We need your help because we're not doing well. That's not the case. We are doing significantly well in terms of impact. What we need is capitalization in order to sustain that work, right? So we have a working group, the California Economic Summit. It's the first time ever that there's a creative economy working group at an economic summit here in California. And then we're also looking at things around arts and health. We have I'm not going to say anything you haven't heard before, which is we are in a mental health crisis. Our Surgeon General for the United States has talked about an epidemic of loneliness and isolation. There are roles for the arts to play in all of this. We have the data that supports it. And so we are looking at things around arts on prescription, so that instead of when you go to your doctor and you say, I'm suffering from anxiety, depression, whatever it may be, that they say, instead of saying, well, here's a prescription for some pharmaceuticals, they might think, they send you to a caseworker, they evaluate you, and then they might say, you know what you need to really do? Is you need to go to a dance class. You need to take a ceramics class. You need to go to a museum. You need to go to a theater. You need to study ballet. You need to attend the Moxie. Those are the things that we could actually prescribe. And this happens in Canada. This happens in Germany. It happens in England. And we want to bring it here to California. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about that we want to do. So in terms of advocacy, again, because that's our lane and what we talk about, this really is important to build your relationships with your elected officials. We appreciate the Pro Tem's office and Tony Duran for showing up here today. It's really, really important. And I just want to say something about the Pro Tem. The Pro Tem has a very powerful position in the state of California. At the end of the day, when the budget is decided, there are essentially 5 people who have an influence, and she is one of them. So your role as advocates is critical, and we ask you to support ensuring that there is increased investment in arts and culture, because it does make a difference, hopefully to you. It makes a difference to the people that you serve and that you care about. So, and I'll just say also, join your regional and statewide advocacy organizations. Join SDRAC. They're doing amazing work here. You've got leadership and Felicia and all the other fabulous people that are on her board. And it really does make a difference. I know City of San Diego can't say it makes a difference, but Jonathan Glass, I know, is on our board as well. So he believes in the power of advocacy. And so we just encourage you to do that. And again, you've heard it before, advocacy is a marathon, not a sprint, right? We've seen a 2,500% increase in baseline funding for the California Arts Council. Let's be honest, we started at $1 million. And so that does make that difference. We've seen historic creative workforce legislation pass. We've seen a $1 billion arts education ballot measure pass in the state of California, huge. We've seen record investments in one-time programs and relief funding. And we have seen increased public awareness that arts and culture are a leading industry and solution partner for California. We are part of the solution. We just have to make the case, right? We just have to continue to make the case. And we like to say we're a smart investment, right? Hi, all caps on the art. So we thank you for your time today. We wish we had more time with you. We'll be back. Please take some Danish with you. And then the final thing is this. We did do a survey. It's very short, takes you about 3 minutes. You can scan it right here. You can scan it on here on the QR code. We will send it to you as well. See, get your phones out, take it out right there. They're also here. It literally takes you 3 minutes. It just helps us to gather the data we need to continue these important conversations. So thank you so much for coming, and we hope to see you again soon.